So welcome to the Boomerang Podcast. I'm here with our roving reporter, Bill Jackson. And today we have a very special guest, Kris Jurski. Kris, how you doing?
How's it going? Good for having me.
Good, thank you. Yeah, so we're pretty involved. We know the players in this movement, and I think my audience. It's a group of nothing but patriots. I'd love them to get introduced to your work. Tell us about kind of what you're up to, what you're doing these days, because you're onto some really serious business.
And he's in my home state, so.
and he's in Florida. So
Well, I usually like to introduce myself as just telling people a little bit about my background, why I'm a little bit wired differently for the elections. I was a first generation Polish American. Both my parents were legal Polish immigrants. And I actually had what I thought at the time wasn't too happy, but I went to visit Poland and when I was about 14 years old in '87, and I saw it when it was communism. I came back and kissed the ground. Became a patriot right from that moment. I inhaled. I was obsessed with just trying to figure out how can something so evil actually exist on the planet? Because when we were visiting there, I stood in a bread line. Just about everywhere in the country, there was hardly any running water. You couldn't find toilet paper anywhere. It was a horrible, just evil to me, because at the same time, if you think about the late 80s in America, we had so much abundance, and some of the stories started to finally click in my head, where my aunt came to visit when I was probably about 10 or so, and she saw what would be like a supermarket bakery aisle, like a Publix or something like that, and then start bawling and start crying because she just saw all this bread everywhere and all of the abundance we had in our supermarkets. So when I saw that, I came back and I was just like, how can anything so evil be in existence on a planet? And nobody was talking about it. Nobody. And I used to argue with my teachers all the time in high school and college, just trying to figure out, you guys are sitting here in this relatively abundance, and there's people starving on the planet, and nobody wants to take on those injustices. Right. They're too busy basically figuring out their pronouns nowadays. And then, as fate would have it, I joined the military after that experience, and I met a Venezuelan woman when I was in my 20s. And then I watched her country get systematically dismantled, all because of an election. So that's what really, really irked me. Basically, when 2020 happened, it was deja vu. Everything that they're doing to us for the last 3 years is literally the same playbook that they played out in Venezuela to a T.
Well, we're using the same machines, right?
Yeah, literally. Even in Florida, the Smartmatic machines were built here in Boca Raton. So they built everything in Florida. And I'm telling everybody that we have a special penance here in Florida to deal with, because I just got this sick feeling that Florida actually started this mess for the whole country based on the hanging Chads BS that we had to go through back in the early 2000s. So everything is really a hub here in Florida when it comes down to the technology. A lot of the players, the vendors that we see out there got their tentacles spread out, first from helping Venezuela. We had IBM and all those. If you've ever been to that park in Boca Raton, IBM is like 2 blocks away. All the major tech companies that were in Florida were within driving distance of this place. And it was a tiny little shack that they were building software for Venezuela elections. It really irked me when I found out about it and tried to find as much information as we can. And then lo and behold, I heard later that, I didn't follow it after it happened in Venezuela. And obviously they didn't talk about it in the news. But it turned out that Smartmatic actually made its way into essentially what they call the operating system of our entire election system. So they did change a couple things since they played that game in Venezuela. I would say the closest thing we have to Venezuela, the voting machines in Venezuela, is something like Louisiana, where it's a pure touch machine. That's essentially the model. And once they get to that, it's essentially perpetually stolen elections that are audit proof.
And whether you call it Dominion, Smartmatic, I think in Florida, can you enlighten me? What was the name of it? RS system?
Oh, ES&S is the election systems, and I can't remember the acronym, but essentially, basically, they run the majority of Florida. There's spots that we do have Dominion, but there's also probably, I would say, if you go across the South in Texas, primarily ECSS is basically the most popular vendor.
But the biggest thing is when you hear, oh, we don't use Dominion. Oh, we don't use SmartMap. It's all the same software. It's all has the same back doors like Mark Cook was talking about.
Mhm.
And they are literally built into the system back doors that can't be by accident.
Well, in Florida specifically, we uncovered something a little bit different. And when somebody pointed to it, they almost, Clay Parikh, who's a national expert, he calls it the original cheat. Because what we discovered in Florida, Florida has a little bit of a more complicated cheat where we have to have paper ballots in most counties. I say most counties because some counties are switching over to this touch machine with a receipt that pops out. That's what's called a ballot marking device. A ballot marking device, there's absolutely no way you can tell that a human touched and made that vote. Like literally, it's a receipt. It's a printed out receipt, like if you went to the gas station. So there's no way of you knowing. They could just print as many as they need to cover the votes that they create. So in Florida, there were essentially, like when you walk into a booth in Florida, they give you a paper ballot, you mark it with a pen, and then you scan it into a ballot tabulator, they call it. That's primarily what ES&S is basically most famous for. They call it the paper trail. Problem is, we can never see the paper. The election officials never let us near the paper. They'll maybe let us sample like a small little area of like mail-in ballots, but they'll never let us count and view everything as far as an entire precinct. And when I get back to the original cheat, what we found here in Florida was they essentially start mucking around with the voter rolls probably about 2 or 3 months in advance of an election. And we discovered something called Red Belly Road. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, I'll explain that in detail, but essentially it's a combination of stealing people's identity as well as generating so many loose ballots that they just can pick and choose who they can steal anybody's election in any precinct. And the thing that's so hard about this is that to the supervisor of election, you're looking at a system that it all looks legit. They'll count the paper and the paper matches what's being counted in the machines. So what I call it is it's like an audit-proof steal. But in reality, nobody's asking the most important question. Did that person actually want to vote? And that's the really the magic question, because when you lead back down into the trail of how those votes were generated, you get into a situation where it's like impossible. Like perfect example, you walk up to a apartment building that's got like 400 units and there's like 20 voters in there that don't have their apartment number and they voted by mail. So, okay, how did they get a ballot? So it's mind-boggling that we had to fight so much with the supervisor elections in Florida just to explain to them what we're dealing with. And I think finally, after about July last year, either they were gritting their teeth when they just came to that discovery, or they finally started cleaning the voter rolls in Florida. We built a system that basically monitors everything in Florida on a monthly basis. And we were able to basically, but let me first bring you back to Red Belly Road and tell you why we had to do that monthly. So my background is basically I help investors build systems to like scale their companies. And one of the biggest things that we do that's like the heart of any company is their customer list. So we had to clean their customer list because we would always find like these mom and pop companies that had dirty data. So, I mean, I had 20 plus years of experience plus government work where I just basically just knew how to clean addresses and verify addresses. And what we were doing was at the time, I think it was the June, July timeframe of the 2022 primary, we were checking all the addresses for the vote by mail ballot requests that they had. Now, the Republican Party blocked me at every step of I request all across the state, can they give me this data? This is not publicly accessible data. This is what they call the ballot chase. These are people that ask to vote by mail. So that's very important. You have to ask to be on this list. And it's this very specific address that you're asking your mail-in ballot to be sent to that address. So it was very simple. We just took those addresses. I didn't care about the voter. I didn't care about which party. I just wanted to see, was that address correct? And as we're going through the list, like this is one of the first times I had a piece of software to do this. This weird address just bubbled up to the top of the list. It just to me, because it's my hometown, it said Red Belly Road, Claremont. And I'm like, I never heard of that road. I've been here for 5 years. I figured I would have heard that road before. So I went into the voter rolls. I started looking. There's like 37 people on this road. Can't find it in Google. Can't find it in Zillow. Can't find it in the tax records. It's basically a fictitious road. And we were like shocked at this moment. We're like, okay, what's going on here? There's 5 ballots being sent that they showed as delivered. Very important. They actually showed the ballots as being delivered in their software to this fake road. Okay. And we didn't know what to make of it. We thought at first that these were like generated people that were fake, like phantoms. So as we're going through this and looking at this and trying to figure out this problem, the next disc arrives for the monthly update. And we look, and lo and behold, the road switches back to 12th Street, which is the real street. So we had the same voter ID. We went through and looked. Sure enough, these are real people. You check the tax records, these real people. So if you follow the chain of events, we look back over the history. In June, these people's addresses, 37 people had their address changed to a fictitious road. There's mail-in ballots being requested to this fictitious road. They're showing as delivered. And then right before the election, they switch back to their normal address. So the Saturday after the election, we went out purposely on a weekend after the election to make sure everybody was home. And everybody we knocked on the door, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even vote. Like, no, these were all like low information voters. They didn't know what we were talking about. They definitely didn't ask for their address to change. And we got affidavits on the whole street.
And they never requested a ballot.
Yeah, that was the most important thing. They never requested to vote by mail. So they didn't no idea what we were talking about. They didn't ask for their address. But we walked to the end of the street, and the last person on the end of the street said, yeah, I think I got my voter card. And we're just like, hey, can you go get it? And they bring the card back, and it says Red Belly Road printed on it. And while we're sitting there in shock, the mail carrier walks up like a miracle. This all comes together like all at the same time. And the mail carrier says, oh yeah, I remember that. All this political mail was coming in for Red Belly Road, and we didn't know what it was. But I know these people. I've been friends with them for 20 years. So I delivered their voter card. So we were just like floored going, what just happened here? I filled out police reports. I filled out reports to the state. I'm screaming because I think we're getting hacked.
Kris, your story literally proves the grassroots thing. In other words, the local. You saw a name local to you that you didn't recognize. This postal guy, mail carrier, he saw a name that he did recognize.
Yeah.
I mean, this is God's plan out, brother.
Oh, yeah. It was a miracle. Like just being able to stand there at that moment. It was actually even funnier because we walked away and someone made a call, and I was like, oh, you got to get back and ask that lady. She said she had the card. We actually went back to get a picture of the card, and that's when the mail carrier showed up. So it was just really spooky to see all that stuff come together. But it was really like just the fact that I found it, the fact that we got a print of that, it was all miracle, because like nothing should have basically brought us to the attention. If you're looking at the final election results, you would never, ever find this. Never. Because these are literally the people that that's their legitimate address, and it's by design. So, I mean, we've heard it all across the state, all across the whole United States, people showing up at the polls and they're saying, oh, you already voted. And they're like, how is it that I already voted? I'm standing here. I want to vote. And they're given a provisional ballot, patted on the head, and nobody ever looks into it. I mean, I got confronted by some official one time, and they're like, that's impossible. You're just telling a story. And I'm like, well, explain to me how we got a printed voter ID card with the fake address on it, and it was only in the voter roll for 2 months. And then the other thing is that the supervisor election, because we had an article on Epoch Times about it and everything, the supervisor election called Epoch Times. He's like, oh, I use 911 data to do address changes. And there's so many things wrong with that story, because A, he's not supposed to be doing address changes in July. Those addresses are locked per HAVA, per federal law. He's not allowed to change those addresses. B, when you go call 911, they don't even know what Red Belly Road is. There's a Red Belly Road in Sorrento, a different zip code, but there's no Red Belly Road in Florida. And he sticks by the story. And again, we went to both the sheriff's office, the Tallahassee, they all ignored it. They all said that it was, they all stuck to the narrative that, oh, we use 911 data. And I keep on asking, I was like, when was the last time you saw an ambulance or a fire truck deliver mail? Like I do this for a living. I would be literally sued out of existence if I told my clients that I was using 911 data to clean their address data. I mean, if you go to any eBay, what is it, Amazon, every online retailer follows this Fortune 500 plan. You've probably seen it. It's a little screen that pops up. It says, "Can you verify your address?" It adds 4 digits on the end of your zip code. And you think that Amazon's going to send you another MacBook after they send it to the wrong address? Absolutely not. They're not going to send $3,000 worth of equipment to a wrong address. I've used to order $25,000 worth of laptops in a pallet. These people are like, they're either being completely incompetent or they're covering up for a crime, in my opinion, because these things are all easily checked and they refuse to do it.
So you at one point had a disc, right?
Yeah, in Florida, we get a monthly disc that gets sent out every month. The entire state's voter rolls are delivered on a disc for all the 67 counties here.
So don't those two discs make evidence?
Yeah, I mean, you would think. I thought it
was.
I thought it was the most bulletproof, compelling evidence ever found, and that's really probably where I started going out publicly, because everybody asked me to talk about the subject. Like, again, we had pictures of the card. We had affidavits from everybody on the street. We had the digital record of the record being changed. But as far as the state and the supervisor election, which was Lake County,
Well, we know
Allen
the
Hayes.
Secretary of State and the Director of Elections, that we know where they sit.
Mhm.
If they don't want to look at this, then they're not complacent, they're complicit. I mean,
Yeah.
They are.
And at the time they came back and they said it was just an isolated incident. You have to understand, when I explain this, it's such a miracle that we found it, because you're talking about finding a needle in a haystack, more like a needle in a hay field, because you have to find this across. In Florida, we have about 16 million voters, and this is on a monthly basis. So this is happening, 2 months in advance of a vote of an election. And if you just approach this problem like an engineer, you have to filter out people that got married. You got to filter out people that legitimately move. So you have to figure out, how are we going to find these broken addresses? That's why I say it's like a needle in a haystack type of problem. It took me about 8 months of trial and error. And then we finally cracked it, and we built the program that basically does it for the whole state. And now we're to the point where, like, we load the entire state within 2 hours. We have every single instances of this happening the moment it happens. Because the first time I had to look backwards and catch it after it happened, because we could see that the address was flipping back. But the problem with that is that you would find that out after the election. So it was like, that's not good enough. We have to figure out another way to find it the moment it happens. And with a lot of trial and error and a lot of coding, we finally were able to make that. We call it the Red Belly Road report in our system.
It seems like this is the ongoing problem, though. It's like you have these, let's call it, for lack of a better word, bureaucracy. How do you solve this? How do you actually get this stuff into a court?
The one thing that I did for a living was, when I came into these companies, I wouldn't exactly say I was the most popular person at the party, because basically the investors were hiring me to find fraud and waste and scale the company. And you had all these people that were like, "Oh, well, we'll see if we can get them fired somehow." So I had to deal with fraud in timesheets, basically payroll, lots of payroll. I had people arrested because they were actually caught stealing from payroll. What I did over years and years is, I just build traps, for lack of a better word. I have like surveillance cameras in every direction from a data standpoint, and I measure everything. So what I did here in Florida was, I just figured out, I reversed engineered, what do the supervisor elections do on a monthly basis? And more importantly, what can I pull out of the public record? And I built a system that basically watches that on a monthly basis. And essentially we essentially like reversed engineered what they do to voter maintenance every month. And I can see everything they add, everybody that's moved into the county, everybody they delete, everybody that's been moved to inactive, people that have been flipped back on to active, people that get their name changed for no reason. We even found one guy that found the Fountain Youth somehow in Florida. He went from being a 64-year-old man to a 36-year-old man 1 month. So it's just like, and he moves to another county.
Somebody in the calls it the Lazarus effect. We have the
Yeah,
Lazarus
something like
effect
that. I
in
want to
Florida.
find that in Fountain of Youth somewhere, but like, it just, there's so many things that happen. And when we confront them with the data, there's nothing they can say because this isn't something I made up. This is their record. So a perfect example of what happened in, I think, November, right after the last election, the 2022 election, we caught Palm Beach County deleting 50,000 people for only a month. This is Trump's county. So right during the election, they removed 53,000 people. And then right after the election, they put them back. And when we confronted the supervisor election down there, I think it was, her name's Wendy Link. You should have seen how quickly the tone changed. Like before this moment, I'm getting called an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. Go to Arizona. They need help. And then as soon as I presented this stuff, including all of the files that they deleted, because I showed them every single voter that they deleted. Oh, the tone changed completely. But they were like, Mr. Jurski, I'm sorry, but we can explain this. This was just a glitch. And I said, that's fine. Can I have it in writing? Because I'm representing the Florida Republican Assemblies, as well as I'm writing an article with Epoch Times. I don't want to misconstrue what you said. So just please put it in writing and explain to me that this had no effect on the election. That was the end of the conversation.
Right.
So it's never been addressed since.
No, they again, like, but the thing is that the word got out after that there's nowhere to hide. Like literally, we have every single address in the state of Florida being monitored. We know exactly what they're doing to that voter record every single month. And we know if the address is good or not. So it's just like we've built such a net to watch them. Like think about like 1 million or 17 million surveillance cameras watching every voter record in the entire state. That's essentially what we built. And those reports now go out to our locals, and all the local counties watch those reports on a monthly basis and then can bring this information up directly with their supervisor elections.
So Kris, what's going to happen in the 2024 election?
I hope to get this out to as many states as we can. I mean, Seth Keshel gives me a lot of acclaim by saying that we're the reason we turned Florida around. Since we've been doing this in Florida, we've cut the undeliverables in the state. It started out, I think, about 1 million, just under 1,900,000, and now it's like 340,000. But most of that cleanup was on the Democrat side because that's primarily where the phantoms were. I tell people that all this BS that they tell us that states turn purple and blue and those colors like you're choking to death. I mean, that's not ironic. Basically, that it's all fabricated. Like they do this by design. They were trying to turn Florida blue, and with this system now, we can monitor it and stop it, preventively stop it. So the real question is
blue. I mean, blue, red, blue, doesn't matter the colors because they can turn the election and do whatever they want, but at least they had the plausible deniability, correct?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is that like the way this deal was done was so intricate that like literally if you did an audit, you would just be dumbfounded being, well, it's all there. The ballots are all there. So that's what was that's why they called it the original cheat, because we believe that's how they turned California blue, was they flooded the state with these mail-in ballots the same way. When I went back in time and I looked at the rolls in California, the percentages of stuff, it went from, I think it jumped one single year, it jumped from like 6% mail-in ballots to 14%. And guess who ran that year for an election? Just take a wild guess.
Schwarzenegger?
No, it was Pelosi. And then right after they did that, like everybody else started to come along, Schumer, or not Schumer, Skiff, basically Harrison. They like just let in, and then it went from 14% mail-in ballot to now it's like 95% mail-in ballots. And I mean, you've probably seen the movie 2000 Mules. I keep on telling people this is a systematic steal. They are literally driving box trucks full of pre-printed ballots with pre-signatures already printed on them and everything. That was another thing. I used to do certificates when I did this work too, and I would print signatures on a certificate. And if unless you had a magnifying glass, if you were looking across the room, you wouldn't know that that was a printed signature. And when you put this through a machine and you have a printed signature that's stolen from your digital file and the machine checks it, it's 100% match. So it's not being rejected as a bad signature. The only signatures that are being rejected are the people that probably actually wrote a signature. So it's maniacal what they
And
did
even
here.
then, they were turning down the sensitivity to the machines to an acceptable level.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
so many things that should
Yeah.
be able to happen that
Yep.
are occurring everywhere. And I mean,
Yep.
are you familiar with Shasta County, California? And
Yeah, they were trying to get hand count ballots over there. I haven't been able to follow up with the last 2-3 months though.
well, I know they overturned their board of supervisors, correct?
Yeah, they're trying to basically get hand count ballots. The last time I know, there's a guy out there also working over the voter rolls there as well. I've been so knee deep in trying to get all this work done here. I haven't been able to follow up with them.
Everybody's in the weeds. I mean,
Yep.
because this isn't a massive amount of fraud and manipulation. And I think Biden even said it best. Isn't he the one that actually admitted that they had a
Greatest.
Yeah.
greatest
Yeah.
election fraud scheme ever, or something like that? I'm not going to quote him because
Yeah, so you made a point at the very beginning about the machines. The thing about this steal is we don't even think they're really manipulating the machines in certain parts. I know at the end they do have the capability of doing this, but in certain areas that they're being watched, they just need the machines to report back what's the tabulated result. Because literally the printers have this on a point, like me, anybody that's got a credit card statement, or we hardly get those in the mail anymore, but the mechanized scalability of that stuff to happen on a monthly basis, that's all there. So you got to start thinking about like factories that are churning these things out, plus box trucks delivering them. And when I made the accusation of it at first, people were like, "You're crazy. There's nothing like that there." And then when we started looking into the printers of Florida, there's one printer in Florida that prints 2/3 of the state. And they're located right in Orlando, like not even two miles away from the post office. And when we went and checked, they have no supervision. They are allowed to just back up a box truck to the post office, and they just wheel out baker rack after baker rack and dump them in the general delivery, completely unsupervised. So you're going to tell me with a straight face that, oh no, these are people way above approach. And the topper on top of that, we were looking into the employees of this company, right? And it turns out that one of the people that's the key people that works with our data in Florida for elections is married to the supervisor election of Leon County.
There you go.
So the guy in Leon County is promoting mail-in ballots, and his wife is printing them here in Orlando.
Unbelievable. Kris, where can people find you? Where can our viewers go and get in touch with the work you're doing?
Yeah, primarily my businesses were under the People's Audit. It's the-peoples-audit.org. That's primarily where I post all of our findings and things like that. I do a lot of work with the Florida Republican Assemblies. I'm VP for the entire state here. I can't stress enough how great Florida Republican Assembly has been, because the normal Republican Party was putting out all kinds of roadblocks to be able to get the data as well as promote our findings. But FRA has been just a solid partner in helping us get that word out, and also fighting for the things we need, like in legislation, like hand count ballots is one of the big ones we're going for right now.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I follow your Telegram as well. And then of course, I knew you were also with David Clements and in on the Let My People Go movie.
Yeah. He got me into that movie for a little bit because we told the Red Belly Road story here recently. Yeah, my social media on Truth and Telegram are both The People's Audit without any hyphens.
We'll put that in the description, because you do so much great work that I want my audience to get to your pages, see what you're up to, and educate themselves and hopefully take some action.
Great. Yeah, because we need it. I mean, as far as our only thing we can do from our end is essentially save people the time of going through these mountains of data, but we still need boots on the ground basically to know, because everybody like me, the way I recognize Red Belly Road is because I'm a local. These addresses, they'll be flagged, but ultimately it's up to the people on the ground to basically discern if they're worth pursuing.
Amazing.
Locals getting involved. This is absolutely what we need.
Name of the game. Unbelievable work, man. We salute you.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.
Thank you.